Today, I'm thrilled to have Mike Malloy, founder and CEO of Malloy Industries, on the show. Having started out as a consultant at Deloitte, Mike now spends his time helping growth stage companies scale effectively, guiding CEOs from 1 million to 50 million in revenue by connecting them with vetted fractional executives, giving businesses access to expert talent without the burden of full-time hires. With extensive experience in helping B2B companies scale both within his own businesses and for many others, Mike is also an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, where he shares his passion for entrepreneurship and company building with students and alumni. And Mike, really appreciate you taking the time to chat to me.
Thanks, Freddie. I'm excited to be here. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and looking forward to the conversation. And, I may sprinkle in a couple of dad jokes as well. I'm just wondering, Freddie, do you know why the chicken fell in the well?
Absolutely no idea.
Yeah, it's because the chicken couldn't see that well.
Oh no, we're going to be, listeners, you're in for a treat. Yeah. Well, look, Mike, as I mentioned, really appreciate you taking the time. And I think a really good place to start, of all of the places that we can start this conversation, is probably looking at some of the smaller companies that you've worked with and worked for over your years and experience. And as a business owner yourself, where do you see early stage companies typically misspend their time when trying to grow and scale after reaching, say, a couple million in revenue? And what should they be focusing on at that stage?
Great question. And this is one of the, I think, biggest stressors for CEOs and entrepreneurs, is that they feel like they have to wear 17 hats and also solve 37 different hair on fire problems at all times. There are different types of work that CEOs and entrepreneurs can do that are more higher leverage. And if you think about an analogy, you can break work into $10 tasks that you could pay somebody on Upwork $10 to do. And by the way, checking and sending emails falls in this bucket. Then there's $100 tasks that you could also probably pay somebody to do. But then there's $1,000 and even $10,000 tasks that are more strategic thinking, focused on partnerships, building relationships, bringing in new large accounts, and interviewing and hiring new team members. Those are the high leverage, high impact things that the CEO should be focusing their time on. The day-to-day operations, kind of in the weeds in the business, is not the best place for their time to be spent. I think one of the first things as you're growing and scaling you should think about is getting some form of virtual assistant, EA, chief of staff eventually, who can help manage your inbox, your calendar, handle one-off requests, so that you can confidently delegate those things to kind of shuffle up. And then as the company grows, ideally, it's a self-expanding team where everybody's unique abilities are kind of aligned with what they're doing. And as they shuffle up, you bring on new people to take on some of the hats that don't really fit that well. I see a lot of technical founders leading sales teams and running their weekly sales meeting when they have a master's in computer science and are super smart at tech stuff, but they don't know how to lead salespeople, how to motivate them, how to actively run that weekly pipeline meeting. That's the type of thing that is great to bring in a fractional sales executive or a platform like Dealpad to help navigate how to move deals through the funnel, bring in the revenue so you can grow and scale, and you occasionally make appearances on sales meetings, but not feel like you need to orchestrate all of the things in all of the departments. It's too much. And that's what leads to burnout. That's what's overwhelming for entrepreneurs, or, they're overworked. People typically don't start a company so they can work 80 to 100 hours a week. That's not the dream.
And thinking about, especially the sales part of that, at what point for a early stage company would you say you need to start thinking about hiring salespeople? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, great question. I think as the CEO and founder, you're responsible for the first tranche of customers. Whether that's getting to 5, 6, 7 figures in revenue, depends a little bit on the product, service, average contract value. But I think it's irresponsible to say, hey, let me just go hire somebody to do sales. I don't want to touch sales. I don't want to talk to the customers. I want to just be in my office jamming on code all day. You need to go out there and talk to the market, because the solution in your head isn't the thing that the customer wants. They may have a problem, and it's more important you fall in love with the customer's problem than you fall in love with your solution, because it's going to have to change and evolve. And so I think as you start to hone in on who your ICP, your ideal client profile is, and you're able to sell initially it's going to be first connections, people who know you, leverage those warm relationships. But once those maybe start to run dry and you need to go either generate some inbound leads or do some cold outbound outreach, that's when it makes sense to bring in some people on the sales team, whether that's, an SDR, a sales development rep, account executives, or, VP of sales, chief revenue officer. And all of those roles can also be brought in on a fractional basis. It doesn't have to be a full-time 6-figure salary with bonus and benefits and all these things, but it makes sense to bring in somebody who has sold in this industry or to this ICP in the past. They can kind of bring both some playbooks that work as well as Rolodex and, network who may be potential buyers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess just de-risks your time and money spent on individuals that you may not necessarily know will work out.
Exactly. And if you don't know who buys the thing and you want to hire somebody else to figure that out, that's expensive because you're not really going to be making money while they're figuring it out, and if you're paying, let's say $10K a month, for a fractional executive to lead this whole sales strategy, but the people aren't buying because you're selling to the wrong people, like you got to kind of figure that out. And that's why like our sweet spot at Malloy Industries is helping companies that have at least hit 1 or 2 million on their way to 10 to 20 million so that we can have that repeatable, scalable sales process in place for them.
Makes a lot of sense. Thinking about the kind of specific sort of sales tactics and principles that I guess you've been exposed to growing your own business and then also kind of scaling go-to-market functions for other businesses. What would you say is the most effective yet overlooked strategy for closing mid-market and enterprise in particular that at least sellers don't leverage enough? They're not using enough.
So I love the PASTOR sales framework, which stands for problem, accentuate the problem, solution, transformation, offer, response. And I think salespeople do not spend enough time on the problem and then accentuating the problem. Let's really dig the knife in there. And it's not just on the first call. It's on every single sales call with every single stakeholder. Understanding, playing back in their words, what you've heard the problem is, and then asking kind of follow-on questions about what are the negative consequences if this isn't solved. And not just the business negative consequences, but maybe you want to coach little Johnny's soccer team, and if you're working until 7, you miss practice at 5, and he's stuck there and needs to ride home. Like understanding, and that also leads to, at the beginning of every call, spend 2 minutes building rapport. Hey, before we started this recording, and hey, how was your birthday? I went to music class. That's great. Like those bonds shine through and allow people to be more vulnerable and open up to you on a personal side about what they're going through and how this may, help them. And I think when you think about like the negative consequences, like a few questions that I'll kind of sprinkle in here, and it's like, have you thought about like what would happen if you don't do anything about this problem and your situation just gets worse? What are you going to do if nothing changes, if you just keep doing what you're doing for the next 12 months and it just stays with the status quo? What happens to the business at that point? And then I also like the transition of like, do you want to keep living with this pain point if you don't have to? And now you're starting to, again, well, let me do this for you. What time is it? And I know you're in a different time zone. Yeah.
It's 4:15.
So that's an example of me asking a question that directed your attention where I wanted you to go. As a salesperson, what are questions you can ask to direct the prospects or the future customers' attention on the pain point, on the problem? Like they need to be feeling it viscerally. It needs to be top of mind. Because if they're not feeling it and thinking about it, they don't care to solve it. They don't need a solution or a transformation or an offer if there's no problem front and center that they're like, oh, that thing does suck. And it has, we have missed our quota. The best ever months are, I am spending an extra 10 hours a week on these TPS reports that maybe your AI software or whatever could solve in, 10 minutes. I think that is something that for more complex B2B sales, when there's different stakeholders, it's also mapping out problem to stakeholder in that specific company and more generalized in the personas. Like what is the CFO's problem that you're typically solving? What's the COO's? What's the CEO's, and then what's like the low level implementation person's problem that you're doing to make their life easier so that you can, again, help everybody feel the pain and like want to get on board and support whoever your biggest internal champion is to ultimately make the purchase.
It's a great point, Mike. And yeah, I think it's incredibly topical, at least now, in single multi-threading. I'm seeing a lot of, that type of at least multi-threading, yet having those personal conversations with the multiple different personas that you need to talk to relate to them. So there's a really good video I watched actually on LinkedIn earlier today of Brian LaManna. I think I'm not sure what company he works for, I think he's gone. And one of the things that he does is on demos, especially if he's got multiple stakeholders on that demo, he'll wrap up after that call with a follow-up email, summarize really nicely. But then the day after, he'll follow up with each and every single individual on that call. It's very, very specific to the reason that at least they highlighted why all of this makes sense for them and highlighting those pains. I think that a lot of reps, we don't do that enough.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think a lot of people send the mass email to everybody who was on the call and think that should be good. But there's this like human bias, like the bystander bias, where like if everybody sees a thing, they think somebody else is going to do it, so nobody does it. So if you email 7 people and CC them all, like, yeah, we'll do it. If you just email me and I know I'm the only person at the email, I'm like, oh, I got to respond. And I'm also like, oh, he's a thoughtful person connecting with me one-on-one. And so I think that's a brilliant strategy. Another piece of that like individual follow-up too is sometimes you'll find in the demo, like, oh, we missed stakeholder A or B, is it in the room? Sending a follow-up email that speaks specifically to that person, that persona's problem or pain point that you're pretty sure from other people that you send to your biggest champion to forward along to that person, I think is an effective way. It's like a kindergarten game of telephone where you like whisper in people's ears. Like the more you can explicitly say exactly what you want to say through the game, the better it goes. I'm also a big fan in sales meetings to say the last 2 or 3 minutes to BAM, which stands for book a meeting from a meeting. Like the goal of every meeting is to get the next meeting. So don't like run your demo up to the 29.5-minute mark. I like the 25-minute, but we're running up at time. You might say something like, hey, this was a good first call. It gives me more understanding of your situation, the challenges you guys are going through compared to where you want to be. Really, the next step would be to book another call with decision maker A and B to go over a full demo about how we solve the same problems for clients like you, get them where you want to go. Would that be helpful? And they're like, yeah, that would. Great. Do you guys mind pulling up your Google Calendar and just seeing what Chris's availability looks like next Tuesday? Like, let's just see if we can get something on the books. It saves 7 back and forth emails. It's so much more efficient. It decreases getting ghosted. And 9 times out of 10, internally, they can see their coworkers' calendars. And so Chris, who's never got an email from you, isn't that inclined to respond to hey, Chris, you available next Tuesday at 2? But Joe, who's his coworker, says, yeah, he's not available at 2. He's got 2:30 to 3:30. Cool. We're booking for 45 minutes. It gives us the buffer to go to an hour. And again, all of that is a much more effective use of the last few minutes of a meeting than trying to cram in another feature or benefit or something.
Completely. And I think it's just, it also reinforces just helping the buyer in what they need to do and what you as a salesperson need to go through, right? How can I make these guys' lives easier? I think it's a really good point.
Can I riff on them for one other second? Let me pull up a little prop here. So something that I think is great is connecting on a personal level, like a family, married, you have kids. So like I have a 2.5-year-old chief cuteness officer, and I highly recommend this book, The Daily Dad by Ryan Holiday. It's like a page a day with some good advice about being a good parent. And what I have started to do, and I actually learned this on a sales call this summer with another guy who literally has his book right there. I had my book right now. It was awesome. He's like, yeah, man, at like 5:01 or 6:01, like whenever I wrap up work, I shut down my laptop and I read the page for today. And that's the like mental shift from boss mode to dad mode. And I'm trying to shut that box of all the open threads and sales and meetings and work I have to do. And just like, hey, let's go roll on the ground and like play with Duplos or cars and make dinner and go to the park, and like, yeah, maybe I come back at 9:00 after he goes to bed, or maybe I just say, hey, that was a good enough day. I'm going to get up early tomorrow. We'll give it another shot. And I have found talking about what it's like to be a dad with other dads. And like, I constantly will like recommend that book. And I sales called 2 days ago and like talked to the guy. And then at 5:30, I walked to get my son up from his nap and like took a selfie with the book and like sent it to him. Like that was my first follow-up email after a meeting. It wasn't, hey, let me sell you the saying, hey, book this next meeting. It was, hey, as a reminder, Daily Dad is awesome. Here's the page for today. I think you'll love it. And then the next email was, hey, here's some resources I think will be helpful about time management, because we talked about like he's struggling to balance 6 locations and needs help with the fractional ops exec. And then it was, oh yeah, and we'll follow up too with the thing you'll buy from us, hopefully this fractional operations executive. But the idea of giving first, adding value both on the personal and in professional fronts as well.
Yeah, I think I've just written, I'm not a dad yet, but I have written that book down just so I remember. to get when I'm ready. Like, I think it's also the personal side of that. You can be valuable in other ways, not necessarily with what you're selling or as an expert in the field. And I think that's a really good point that at least I've overlooked many times, and I think would be very good for sellers. Sticking on the sort of sales strategy sort of wavelength and conversation, what is at least one unconventional sales strategy that you think that you've seen work really well over, your previous experience that has delivered outsized results for the companies that you've advised?
Well, I'm going to pause here and just ask a question. Freddie, do you know how you tell the difference between an alligator and a crocodile?
No.
Well, it depends. Are you going to see it later or in a while? And so this is something that I use tremendously effectively, and it's humor. And one of our core values is enthusiastically fun. So every single meeting, I get to tell at least one dad joke. And I've been training my whole life, and not saying everybody has to use humor or tell jokes, but it's a great way to disarm people, either as the first thing I say in the meeting, or there's also a great idea thing called when, about timing and how the flow of certain things go. And one of those things is people don't remember most of an interaction. They remember the very beginning. They might remember halftime, especially halftime of a basketball game or something, and they remember the very end. And so I always tell a joke at the very beginning or the very end, because that in their brain, they associate smile, laughter, humor, positive things with interacting with Mike. And if that's the association, when they see my email, my text, see me on their calendar, they're like, oh, at least I get a joke out of it. We have a client who literally, we've been working with for over a year now, got a fractional sales executive with us. It's going great. I can't send him an email without telling a joke. He's like, no, this is in the contract. If you're going to email about anything, I want you to PS me a dad joke in there. And another thing that we did, I'm going to encourage all the listeners to do, is to send anniversary presents. This isn't new customer acquisition, but this is about retention and expansion. What was the day you signed the first contract? Have a spreadsheet somewhere, someone on your team who tracks that. And 2 weeks before your anniversary, send them an anniversary gift. And so this client in particular is from Israel, moved to the US. We found on Etsy a beautiful artist who had 3D printed the skyline of Israel, got it, sent it to him, said, hey, happy 1 year anniversary. He took a selfie, sent it to me. It was lovely gift, so thoughtful. Can't wait to celebrate our second anniversary. Boom. This is a month-to-month thing that doesn't have to go on for another 12 months, but that's a pretty strong commitment as a result of being thoughtful, and showing that, hey, we care about this relationship. And I wouldn't always wait for 1 year. Do it after a month, do it after 3 months, send little cards, use handwritten. I have on Etsy is great. You can get pretty personalized things that are thoughtful, and it shows that you care. And then if it's a physical thing that somebody will then see, they think of you every time they see that. I love Hawaiian shirts. I think for every time you've seen me, I've been rocking a Hawaiian shirt. We recently got Malloy Industries branded custom Hawaiian shirts. And so we have a referral campaign where if anybody refers a paying client to us, we'll mail you a Malloy Industries Hawaiian shirt. You may not have the flamboyant style that I have, but it might come out once or twice a year. And you might see in your cloud that I'll and remember that we exist. And that's an interesting way to not just be in the crowded inbox and we got hundreds of unread emails and things to go through, but I only get a couple things in the mail, something to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess how much would you say, and I know you mentioned a book there that I've actually written down, and it is without saying that for anyone listening, all of the resources and books that Mike or we kind of talk about in this episode will be all in the description of this podcast. Obviously, we want to show value, and obviously we want to build those relationships. But how much of just normal sales would you say is behavioral economics, right?
95%, understanding how humans operate, the 6 principles of influence and persuasion by Robert Cialdini. I'll drop a resource here. I think this is it. It's all about what are the things that kind of drive people, and how can you, in a thoughtful, morally right way, leverage them? It's not, I'm not in any way I'm saying you should manipulate people to get them to do things, but there's research that shows, and this is this concept of persuasion as well. If you play French music in a French wine shop, you're going to sell 28% more French wine, and if you have social proof and testimonials and you have authority that, hey, you were a speaker at this conference, and people generally like you. See, remember, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And all things being equal, they're going to do more business with the people they know, like, and trust. And even if things, including price, are not equal, they'll still do money with the people they know, like, and trust. Quick example, I switched health insurance over the summer. My dentist used to be $10 for a checkup. It's now $60. I can go with this guy for like 3 years. He's great. I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan. He's a Baltimore Ravens fan. He's got kids the same age. I always tell Joe, everyone at the dental office knows I'm the dad joke guy. So like, it's a good place to go. In no way would I consider switching to a new dentist to save $50, even if I could go find one that was in new. And so finding ways to build relationships in a way, and it often comes from both adding value on the front end. And I'm a big fan of Zig Ziglar. One of the things he taught me was that you can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. And so leading with, hey, how can I help you? What do you need? And then there's also the concept of reciprocity of like, oh yeah, you did help me with this stuff. Yeah, look, like, let's go with you guys. I think you're going to do a great job.
Do you have a book of jokes, or is this all off the top of your head?
So, Freddie, it's funny you ask. I actually store my jokes in my database. For the dad joke live in the database. I am a connoisseur. I have multiple books. I just got another. I just turned 38 a couple days ago. My older brother sent me a dad joke book for my birthday. We got a page a day calendar. We started. I'm gonna put this in the show notes for you listeners as well. We have a dad joke a day newsletter. We started about a year ago, so we've got almost 250, maybe 300 jokes in there. And so it's a labor of love. I enjoy it. Keep your eyes out for 2026. Maybe we'll have a Malloy Industries page a day dad joke calendar designed and printed. It's in the works. It's not a thing for next year, but I think we'll get there. And
I'm going to be in line for one, Mike. Don't worry about that. See.
One other thing too, just on the dad advice, like I mentioned, the Daily Dad. I have a page on my website. I'll just drop in the chat for advice for new dads who are expecting their first kid. I didn't know what I was getting into. When my wife was like 6 months pregnant, I emailed 50 dads and was like, what's about to happen and what should I do? And so I kind of compiled all that advice, got some good product recommendations in there and some books that helped along that part of the next season of life, if you will.
Awesome. Well, like as I mentioned earlier, all of this stuff that Mike is sending me now is all going to be in the description. So anyone listening can go in there and get all the resources that Mike is sharing, which is incredibly helpful. To wrap things up, Mike, I think we should stick along this trend or topic of, unconventional sales strategy and things people don't necessarily think of. Thinking of all of the businesses that you've worked for, the fractional executives that you have at Malloy Industries, the businesses that you've scaled, what have you found? And if you have to pin it to one thing, what have you found to be the most counterintuitive truth about scaling B2B sales?
Less is better. Focus on less opportunities, less deals, but apply 10 or 100 times more energy and effort to them. Don't just try to get an email list of 10,000 people and blast them all and get your, 1 to 3% response rate and see where it goes. Like there's this concept I learned from a CEO mastermind group I managed called the Dream 100 strategy. Like pick your dream 100 companies you want to work with and only focus on them. And there's a whole playbook. Let me see if I can pull this in real quick. I literally have a poster board here. So first of all, you got to define who your ICP is, who the avatar is, and know that for sure. 100 companies can be overwhelming. Start with 2. Let's start with 10 companies that you really want to focus on. Identify the key people by name, all of the personas, the stakeholders, figure out their LinkedIn, probably find their emails somewhere on the internet as well, and connect on LinkedIn. When you connect, ring the bell so that you then get a notification every single time any of these stakeholders post so that you can comment, and engage with what they're doing. Because what you're trying to do is make drops and drops and drops in the relationship bank, add value. You're not selling them in the LinkedIn comments. You're kind of reiterating, that's a really smart point. And also this thing that builds on it because I agree and we have a similar mindset. You then want to email them. And again, you're trying to get to a meeting to get to that first meeting. Sometimes it's hard to do. People get a lot of emails. People don't get is a lot of physical packages nailed to their office or their home address, which with a little bit of research, you could probably find out. And you can do it via Amazon, or you could also, next level is buy something bulky that is weird, that's really going to stand out, like a soccer ball or something, football, and then when they open it, have a note that makes some sort of joke or some sort of connection, call me and we'll kick it back and forth and see if we can help each other or something, I've heard of somebody even making like custom puzzles, like a 100-piece puzzle on Vistaprint, saving one piece and saying, call me if you want the missing piece. Like something like, and the puzzles of their logo. It's all about them and the company, and it's not your swag. It's like putting stuff with their logo on is going to be way more impressive. And what's fascinating is like, if you had to do this for 10,000 people, you can't afford it. It's super expensive. But if you're just focused on 10 companies, and if you think about like, what's the lifetime value or even the annual kind of average contract value, if it's 5, 10, 15, 20K, like, wouldn't you spend $1,000 to land that deal? So couldn't you maybe buy some nicer things than just like a pen with your logo on it? Like, dude, let's get like a flag with their logo on it or something. And if you're hosting events, invite them to the events. If it's possible to show up in person, show up in person and just continue to add that every week, multiple ways you're touching multiple stakeholders. It's this concept too of like, do you want to be a fire hydrant that like sprays water in every direction, not that hard, or a fire hose that is just locked in energy, effort, time, attention, money, all of it's going toward these specific companies.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think also one of the things that you mentioned there is having physical things and physical ways of building relationships. I think it's so important, especially in an online digital world where we're always stuck on Zoom and, talking on LinkedIn. How can we build relationships where people want to build relationships? If you can't be in person or go to events, support and invite them to dinners, obviously depending on CAC, but also, sending those gifts, right? It's a physical thing. I think that is incredibly important that not many people are doing.
For sure. And like, for many years, like I think when I was like 19, I started sending out Christmas cards, like well before it was normal. Like me and my dog sent one of my friends and their parents in college. We send them out every year, and I send out all of our clients and the fractional executives we work with and future customers as well get Christmas cards. But what I've also been doing is like, I send Valentine's Day cards. I send St. Patrick's Day cards and like little things that I've drawn with markers with my son, that I would do maybe 24 or 36 of them. Like that doesn't scale, but like Halloween's coming up. We're going to do a Halloween card and send it to a large audience of like me and my wife and my son in our Halloween costumes as just like hey, there's nothing salesy about this interaction. It's like, we're people, you're people. We like you. Have a happy Halloween. That's it. And again, Elena says, how many Halloween cards did you get in the mail last year?
None.
0. Yeah, exactly. Versus how many emails did you get in your inbox on, October 27th last year? Probably a bunch. And so it's that way of standing out that doesn't have to be, more than a couple of bucks. That goes a long way. And there's a story about like the Guinness Book of World Records greatest salesman ever was this car salesman, Joe Girard or something. And what he did, if somebody bought a car from him every month for the rest of their life, they got a card from him. And it was based on that month. There was like Mother's Day, Father's Day, or whatever. And on the inside, it just said, "Hi, Freddie. I like you. Love, Joe." And that's it. And he got so many referrals. They still don't buy cars more than, once every 5 years or whatever, but they know other people who buy it. I'm like, "Oh, you gotta buy a car? Talk to Joe. He's great." And this goes back to those 6 principles of persuasion. One of them is liking. And if I say, "I like you, Freddie," you're more inclined to reciprocate and say, "I like you too, Mike." And suddenly we have a stronger bond. And if I'm telling you every month with a card in the mail that I like you.
It's a really good point. Well, Mike, look, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. I think for those listening, there is 1,000,001 little kind of tips and tactics that you can pull out of this episode. For anyone wanting more resources on some of the books and resources that Mike's mentioned, all of that will be in the description below. Before we wrap up, Mike, is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with? Any final parting comments, a final joke?
I would just say thanks for listening. Would love to connect on LinkedIn. Mike Malloy. Our website is malloyindustries.com. So MalloyIndustries.com/pod, POD for podcast. That'll have some resources and you can learn more. I host a weekly entrepreneur roundtable on Wednesdays at 4 East Coast time. That's free. If you ever want to pop in on Zoom and pick my brain, get some advice, happy to share it. Yeah. One last joke. So Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, they go out for sushi and Obi-Wan's a master. He's eating no problem. Luke cannot figure out the chopsticks. It is a mess. He's picking it up, but he's dropping it in the soy sauce and it goes everywhere. Finally, Obi-Wan loses it and goes, "Luke, use the forks."
And with that, Thanks so much, Mike. See you all next week.